Over the past few months, we have been witnessing the kind of tipping point which we would normally only read about in history books, one of those unstoppable moments during which our culture and our habits are tested and questioned, and after which nothing is the same again. Although many of us will argue that the sense of urgency for change had already been repeatedly flagged by environmentalists as well as social justice campaigners, it has been COVID to mark the start of a period of questioning, reckoning, and hopefully evolving into the kind of people we need to be to put a halt to this misery. Sometimes tipping points act like a magnifying glass under the sun. They point at something and let it catch fire. This time, the magnifying lens has pointed towards corporate greed and the evils of a system which has condoned injustices, exploitation, and abuse because it has them embedded at its core. Our global society, our industry, our brands, our institutions do not value the majority of the people who make them what they are, their workers, quite as much as they value growth. It's profit over people 100%, and it has never, ever looked so terrifying and wrong as during this pandemic. Just as we know that we are facing an environmental catastrophe, unless we rethink our consumption, we are equally facing a social disaster, unless we look at better ways to protect the everyday workers that make up our powerful industries. Fashion is no exception. I am the founder and global creative director of Fashion Revolution, a global campaign that demands a fair, clean, and just fashion industry. And we were born as a result of the Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh in 2013. In itself, the worst industrial disaster in fashion history. Nevertheless, not the first nor the last. When 1,138 people, mostly young women, were killed and thousands others were injured. At the time, transparency was a niche concept confined to supply chain experts. Brands rigorously did not provide any public disclosure over the provenance and make of their products, and consumers had not yet begun a process of understanding how our clothes affect the people who make them, our natural resources, and ultimately ourselves and our communities. Unlike with food, where that reasoning has always been a little bit more advanced. Now there is much more awareness and ferment, and although not enough has changed, without Rana Plaza, we would undoubtedly have been slower at making these important connections. Fast forward to now, and as the lockdown period unfolded globally, what we witnessed was a system incapable of coping, incapable of aligning its business practices to any semblance of humanity, respect, and common sense. And while we saw nature benefiting from our drastically enforced slowing down, stars visible at night, even in the most polluted cities, rivers full of fish, air pollution down as a result of fewer cars and virtually zero planes, we saw a human tragedy develop under our very nose. This April, at the height of the pandemic, Fashion Revolution published a press release. I read parts of it. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, we have heard about the devastating impact of brands cancelling orders, including orders already in production, and changing payment terms, with many brands invoking the first majeure clause to free them from their contractual responsibility to pay suppliers. The COVID-19 pandemic proves exactly why transparency in the fashion industry is so vital. If major brands and retailers publish information about how they do business with their suppliers, then they can be held to account in situations like these. Being transparent about their policies, practices, and impacts, stakeholders can scrutinize areas where brands need to improve, and customers can choose to spend their money with brands that are getting it right. The crisis has brought to light the systemic problems within the industry and revealed just how fragile the system really is. For decades, brands have chased ever cheaper production and factories operating on impossibly tight margins. Consequently, workers and workers' wages and workers' rights have been squeezed. Millions of workers making clothes for some of the world's most profitable companies have now lost their jobs or been temporarily suspended without receiving the pay they are entitled to by law. And the vast majority have no savings to fall back on and no social protection. Poverty and hunger could potentially prove more of a threat to their lives than the virus. Brands may refer to these suppliers as partners on the social responsibility pages of their website, but when it comes down to the wire, one of these partners pays the price whilst the other does a runner. Many of these same brands make billions of dollars in profits every year, and there is no doubt that they have both the resources and the ability, notwithstanding the moral imperative, to fulfill their obligation to their suppliers. As co-founder and global operation directors of Fashion Revolution, Carrie Sommers said, "It is a question of priorities, the shareholders or the workers." Migrant workers are also particularly vulnerable. Not only may they have lost their income as a result of COVID-19, but potentially also their accommodation if it was tied to their work, or are otherwise isolated in crowded hostel rooms hundreds of miles from their families. This is still going on. I urge you all to follow the hashtag #PayUp to find out more and add your voice to this. COVID has also highlighted the profound inequalities that exist much closer to home in our daily lives, in our communities, schools and institutions, and the need to turn a corner and never to look back. Because we cannot grow unless we make defunct those instincts which have allowed for so long the systemic exploitation of people of color and any othering which is such a malign growth at the core of our cultural values. Fashion's links with racism are profound, from its history, which is so closely linked to slavery via the cotton industry, to the impact of colonialism, still very much a failing system, but operating under a different name. Because make no mistake, the systemic exploitation of people and resources in countries which aren't our own for the only scope of making money is a legacy of colonialism. Just like there are more people in modern slavery now than ever, we aren't evolving unless we improve. I do agree with those who call racism another pandemic, except shame on us, because we've known and done nothing about this one for centuries. The first principle of anarchism is fellow man shall not exploit fellow man. I live by this, even if today we can't ignore to mention the exploitation of our natural resources, which is leading species upon species towards extinction. As my colleague Sarah Ali says, treat race as a sustainability issue. To save the planet, to survive this pandemic, and to survive as a human race, we need to all be equal. We need to act in unison, each one of us with a very personal and vested interest to do more. And this cannot happen if some of us are free to pursue opportunities and make decisions, but the majority aren't. I quote Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who wrote on the Washington Post on World Environment Day, "To white people who care about maintaining a habitable planet, I need you to become actively anti-racist. I need you to understand that our racial inequality is intertwined with our climate crisis. If we don't work on both, we will succeed at neither." My solace comes from looking at the younger generations, Gen Z, Gen Snowflake, who are, bless them, they've been making their voices heard over the past year with increasing urgency, first during the Friday for Future protests, and now in defense and support of their Black and brown friends. A generation who will have been touched by the past few months in a radically different way than their parents. Kids, teens, students are all somewhat interrupted at such a crucial time in their lives, so early on, witnessing the worst of people and the best. For the first time in God knows how long, Kim Kardashian and the world's other celebrities feel marginal to a generation who have previously worshipped them unthinkingly. Suddenly there is no credibility, no power in mindless notoriety. The people that count are the doctors, nurses and care workers who save our lives, and other public workers, farmers, postmen, teachers, carers, who make our lifestyles possible. This is a gargantuan cultural shift, and it's raising a generation that aspire to demand profound social, political, and environmental changes. 2020 and the coronavirus crisis will leave deeper signs than we originally anticipated. It is no longer just about surviving lockdown or the depression that we all foresee will come as a result. It is no longer about looking at opportunities to do better from now on. It is to examine the obligations we have towards nature and towards each other, and redress imbalances which were forcefully implemented by few but suffered by many. I would love to leave you with a manifesto for a fashion revolution, and in particular, point 5 and 6. Point 5. Fashion stands for solidarity, inclusiveness, and democracy, regardless of race, class, gender, age, shape, or ability. It champions diversity as crucial for success. Point 6. Fashion conserves and restores the environment. It does not deplete precious resources, degrade our soil, pollute our air and water, or harm our health. Fashion protects the welfare of all living things and safeguards our diverse ecosystems. It's about the planet and its people. It's about us. Thank you.